Freeway interchanges. Noisy, dirty, toxin-spewing land uses that take up acres of space in your city. Even if you accept that they're a necessary evil, it's really impossible to justify having them in a place that's supposed to be dense and walkable, meaning a city's downtown. I went looking all over North America, evaluating the worst downtown interchanges, and I'll tell you how I did it, and then we're going to name and shame the 10 worst, and it's all coming up next. This is CityNerd, weekly content on cities and transportation. Viewer-suggested topics always welcome, but this is one I'm just gonna inflict on you for no particular reason. But it is something I think about a lot because I do visit a lot of cities, and I often find that I'm really enjoying a city's downtown on foot, and then when I want to get to an adjacent neighborhood, I find it's almost impossible to get there by any sort of direct path because highway engineers, in their infinite wisdom, decided to plop down a 50-acre interchange right in the place where I want to walk. So this video is basically a product of me reaching my breaking point. And look, I'm not even necessarily anti-freeway. I recognize that the interstate highway system is important for intercity freight movement, but the idea of not only bringing freeways all the way into our downtowns, but multiple freeways converging with huge interchanges near some of our very highest value land is just absolutely insane. And I'm hoping the intrinsic awfulness of freeway interchanges is self-evident, but in case you need the argument for why downtown freeway interchanges are so terrible, here's how I'd put it, and I'm going to share a few dishonorable mentions to illustrate while I go through this. Interchanges consume massive amounts of land because of geometric stuff like the curve radius you need in order to have loop ramps that function at a design speed of 80 miles per hour or so, and all the design requirements for things like accelerating, decelerating, and merging. And in a central city, that's land that could have been used for the actual things that cities are for, like dense housing and employment, but it goes beyond that. Not only does the interchange itself consume valuable real estate, but it compromises the adjacent land with pollution, noise, and terrible connectivity. So an interchange close into your city's downtown is really a concrete, pun intended, statement of how state DOTs value the convenience of trips to and through cities versus the health and happiness of the people who actually live in them. Okay, so I wanted to find the worst offenders in North America, so here are the 4 things I looked at. One is, how close is it to downtown? And I really wanted interchanges where the center point is within around a mile of the center of downtown, and you get bonus points for being even closer. And then sheer size, meaning the footprint of the interchange. So for this, we're really going to be focused on system interchanges, meaning not interfaces with the local street system, but free flow interchanges between 2 or more freeways, which means lots of space-consuming stuff like loop ramps and flyovers. The other 2 things are related to adjacent land use. I used Tom Forth's population around a point, discussed in an earlier video, to figure out how many people live within a 3-kilometer radius. That's about 1.8 miles for you Yanks, so that's going to give me a rough proxy for how many people's lives are being compromised. And then I identified the zip code the interchange sits within and looked up the Zillow Home Value Index to figure out how valuable the land is. And what we're really getting at here is the opportunity cost of using the land for infrastructure that serves mostly people who don't live there and makes life worse for the people who do. Alright, clearly I'm already in a mood, so let's get into it. For number 10, we're going to Columbus, Ohio. What you're going to find here is, with a lot of these cities, there are multiple interchanges I had to measure and evaluate, so now you know what occupied my waking hours last week. The culprit here is the I-71, I-70 interchange at the southeast edge of downtown. It takes up a whole lot of valuable real estate, and there are over 30,000 people in the 3-kilometer blast radius, which is actually a high number compared to other Midwestern cities I looked at. And the prevailing home prices are higher than you might think as well. So this is a real winner, and I do love a children's hospital that's sited right where there's the maximum amount of carcinogens and airborne particles. Just first-rate work. 9, Minneapolis, and again, several choices as the highway engineers, in their infinite wisdom, decided to construct multiple freeways all converging on downtown. The one that makes this list is the I-94, I-35W, State Route 65 interchange at the south end of downtown. Similar to Columbus, this isn't the one that's the most visually appalling, but it is close in. It has a very high population within the blast radius, over 70,000. Actually one of the highest numbers of anything I looked at. For example, the Jane Burns Circle interchange in Chicago doesn't make this list. It's smaller and, amazingly, less population within 3 kilometers than this Minneapolis location. The Twin Cities are just built different, in a good way, but these freeways gotta go. 8. Houston. Multiple candidates, but it has to be the I-45, I-10 interchange on the north side of downtown. I actually spent a lot of time going through this area when I visited Houston a year ago, and it's just a massive barrier separating lots of great neighborhoods to the west and the north. I have talked about how the inner part of Houston has higher population density than you probably think if you haven't been there, and the population of around 40,000 in the 3-kilometer radius is higher than any of the other Texas interchanges I looked at. The prevailing home price of around $500,000 may also be surprising. And then you've got downtown just south of the interchange, including the Post venue. Pretty fun spot, but enveloped by the interchange footprint, so I kind of feel for the employees who have to spend hours there every day. Let's stay in Texas for number 7. This is the I-30, I-35E interchange on the south end of downtown Dallas. Less population and lower prevailing home prices than the Houston interchange we just looked at, but this one makes up for it in sheer size, just an absolutely depressing monolith. But as big as it is, it's also a perfect example of how system interchanges devalue the surrounding land. Like, just about everything that abuts the interchange is surface parking and vacant lots. Although, I guess if you're in the market for a $5 car wash, a rural-themed beer place in the center of a metro area of 8 million, or some discount spirits, the depressed land value probably enables all that. Number 6, a lovely interchange I got to visit just a couple weeks ago. I-20, I-85, right at the south end of downtown Atlanta. I promise I'm gonna have several nice things to say about Atlanta in my video coming next week, but this freeway interchange isn't one of them. I was staying downtown and would have loved to have walked to Somerville or Mechanicsville, and it's not that it's physically impossible to do it, but if you want to get from, say, your hotel downtown to the Summerhill neighborhood, you're gonna have to endure a long slog over this Capitol Avenue overpass, which just looks interminable and soul-crushing. It actually resulted in Summerhill getting deprioritized in my Atlanta visit itinerary, which is unfortunate. Also, not lost on me that this was constructed where there were historically black neighborhoods, and I'll talk a bit more about that dynamic later in the video. Let's go back to Ohio for number 5, the I-71, I-75 Spaghetti, or I guess Chili Bowl in Cincinnati. This one doesn't rank too highly on population density or prevailing home value, although the housing in central Cincinnati is kind of on the high end for what you might think of as a Rust Belt city. Anyway, it makes up for that in pure size and just the amount of sheer havoc it inflicts on the central city. Can I just throw up a historic map of what downtown Cincinnati used to look like before they decided that a massive tangle of freeway ramps was a better use of the real estate? Because a lot of that original fabric is still here. Cincinnati really is so beautiful. I mean, look at the architecture as you stroll down West 4th Street. It's just gorgeous stuff, but then it just kind of dead ends into the interchange. It didn't have to be like this, and Cincinnati is definitely toward the top of my list of cities where I want to go and film next year. Okay, here's a wild one. The I-5 State Route 63 interchange right between the north end of downtown San Diego and the massively popular Balboa Park. This one has got so much going on. You've got athletic fields right in the southeast quadrant of the interchange, so people can engage in cardio-intensive activities while they inhale like benzene and microplastics, just as God intended. 60,000 people in the 3-kilometer radius, and prevailing home prices are close to $750,000 because it is coastal California, so they are going to build dense residential as far into the southwest quadrant as they can. Like, you can live on a cul-de-sac that has just picture-perfect views of this flyover ramp. And then, say, if you're a dog walker who wants to head over to Balboa Park and spend quality time at the Comic-Con Museum, it should be like a 5-minute walk, but I'm guessing pedestrian connectivity wasn't a major design criterion for the geniuses who built this thing. Okay, I've got 3 more, plus mentions, both honorable and otherwise, and I have not forgotten about North American cities outside the US, but this is just a very, very hard category for other countries to compete in. Usual reminder to click on this stuff if you want to increase the reach of my propaganda, or not if you think system interchanges in the middle of cities are cool. And all the usual ways to stay connected. I don't really have any travel planned for the rest of the calendar year, but got a lot of stuff coming online in the first half of next year, so follow along if that floats your boat. Let's get outside the US. Cities in Mexico are a bit more like European cities in that, yes, there are limited access highways between cities, but they tend to terminate or become more like urban arterials once you get inside the city. There's no expectation that you're going to drive from place to place at uninterrupted free flow speeds within a city. Amazing concept. Canada, you would think would be a bit more like the US, and it is, but even the worst cities for freeways don't have system interchanges anywhere near downtown. I can't stress enough that this is something that we did to ourselves when other countries just didn't. In Vancouver, this is the only city where the people who ask me to come visit there and make a video want me to specifically talk about how it isn't really that great, which to me is just an obvious indication of how good they know it actually is to live in a city that has basically no freeways. If you can afford it. Really, if the great American infrastructure project of 75 years ago was the construction of the interstate highway system, the great project of this generation should be figuring out how to dismantle the most counterproductive parts of it, return valuable, developable land to our cities, and stop setting the expectation that people should be able to drive their personal vehicles through downtown at 70 miles an hour. Dishonorable, Kansas City. I looked at all 4 corners of downtown. All 4 of them are system interchanges, and none of them made the cut individually, not because they aren't hideous, but because population density and prevailing home prices are pretty low. I wonder why. Puerto Rico is in the news a lot at time of filming, so I have to investigate. Nothing I would call a system interchange near the city center, although this cloverleaf by the Plaza Las Americas shopping mall is pretty sweet. And don't try to tell me Puerto Ricans aren't Americans. I've actually been to this shopping mall and it is just first rate. The best Tex-Mex food, the best Chinese food, and the best, I don't know, whatever food fits into a 200-page long menu. Last mention, and this is a tough one, Birmingham, Alabama. This I-20 I-65 interchange on the northwest edge of downtown is so massive, it's almost like they purposely made it unnecessarily big. I mean, most of the interchanges we're looking at seem like there was some effort made to make it more compact. So this would be an interesting one to take a deep dive on because you can get old aerials from the University of Alabama that show the intact street grid. And then you can go look at old redlining maps and take a wild guess where they decided to site this interchange. And people try to tell me the stuff I talk about on this channel isn't political. Be serious. Back to the list, number 3, the I-4 State Route 408 interchange in Orlando. There's a different way I could have done this whole list where this would be number 1, or Birmingham for that matter, but since I'm including population density and prevailing home values as criteria, it doesn't quite rise to the top. This is just a monstrosity though, and since it's Florida, you also get all the retention ponds they need for the massive amounts of runoff that come off this beast. Also, it's practically right in the middle of downtown, separating the central business district from the sports venues. And yes, Orlando does have a downtown. The Sunrail regional line runs right through the heart of the city. Church Street is super cute. It feels kind of like the Disney World French Quarter, and then the whole theme just falls apart once you get too far west. I think FDOT just expanded this one recently, and it's just an absolute monstrosity. What are we even doing? Number 2, you knew Los Angeles was going to show up here, and the freeway setup around downtown LA is regrettable. The one we're going with here is the I-10 State Route 110 interchange at the southwest corner, but dishonorable mention to the I-10 US 101 interchange in the northwest, which was just a bit small, but was the only interchange I looked at that had over 100,000 people in the 3-kilometer blast radius. And that includes the best, or I guess worst example I could find in New York, where the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway meets the Long Island Expressway. And that one sits around 97,000 population. The 10-110 interchange is still over 90K within the radius though, so it's no slouch. And it's just such a weird thing to have in the middle of one of our densest cities. Loop ramps that have actual functioning land uses inside them. Can you imagine having to go to work here every day? Just so dismal. And for number 1, we're going to the Bay Area. And I did look at San Francisco, but there are no system interchanges anywhere near downtown. And Oakland, but the 580-980 is just a bit too distant to make the cut. So it's got to be the I-87, I-280 interchange right at the southwest corner of downtown San Jose. And this one really does check all the boxes. Prevailing home prices approaching $1 million, over 50,000 people inside the 3-kilometer radius. The thing is massive. It's around 100 acres by my reckoning. And if we're doing at least 100 dwelling units per acre close into downtown like we should be, well, you all can do the math. Anyway, intact street grids in all 4 quadrants, Diridon Station in the northwest, all of downtown in the northeast, and I've actually walked through this area and it's not the worst walk, but this is where you're putting a children's museum. Just diabolical stuff. Anyway, I'd love to see the origin destination data on who uses this interchange because just intuitively, it makes no sense at all. Just build more trains. So as an antidote to the truly mind-numbing amount of freeway interchange visuals I just inflicted on you, might I recommend trains. Specifically, Patrick H. Willems' video on the 20 best train movies of all time. Now, you know I love trains, I mean, who among us? And I love countdown list videos, and I'm probably a bigger film buff than you realize. Well, Patrick previously made a video exploring why trains are so often a critical element of great movies, and this is a companion piece where he actually talks through his top 20 train movies and what makes them great. He even has a spreadsheet, and he explains his criteria for what makes a great train movie. This honestly feels like something I should be doing on my channel, but I'm pretty sure you guys would not tune in to watch me talk about movies. And besides, Patrick is much more knowledgeable about film history than I am. The 20 best train movies of all time from Patrick H. Willems is extremely entertaining and introduced me to movies I hadn't even heard of, and now can't wait to watch. It is a Nebula Plus video and exclusive to the platform. Patrick is just a wealth of knowledge on filmmakers from every era, and the video is a great example of how Nebula really gives creators the freedom to experiment and expand on topics they care deeply about. Being part of the community and being able to learn from creators like Patrick has been indispensable for the growth and development of what I do on my channel, and I'm proud to be part of the Nebula platform. It is, after all, a streaming service that's owned by us, the creators, so when you sign up, you're helping us grow a service that, by its very nature, supports all of us in a long-term, structural way, financially, professionally, and creatively. So if you want to support the continued improvement of this channel, and also grow its ability to reach more people and make a difference, signing up for Nebula really is the best possible way to do that. And remember, when you sign up, it's not only an investment in our community of creators, it's also an investment in continuing to make the Nebula streaming experience itself better and better. Because yes, Nebula is kind of like Netflix for people who are a little too into trains, but it really is a haven for content that's a little more thoughtful, with a pretty big idea behind all of it, raising the level of the entire platform and growing it into a prestige streaming service. So if you use my custom link down in the description, it is an amazing value. You get all the Nebula content for 40% off the regular price when you sign up for an annual subscription, so $36 or $3 a month, and the lifetime offer is still on the table. $300, you pay once, and you get Nebula for as long as both you and Nebula exist. Whether that makes sense for you or not is up to you and your favorite actuary. Nebula gift cards are another great option, and we are approaching that time of year. Use my code to get the same great discounts, and then you have a way to share all the Nebula content you enjoy with your family and friends. Even if they already have Nebula accounts, you can gift them a free year at the discounted price using my custom link down in the description. And new, Nebula subscribers now get guest passes, 1 every month or 3 per quarter if you're on annual or lifetime. Once active, guests can binge all the Nebula content they want for a week, and no payment info is required. So tons of ways to share and enjoy Nebula, and no matter which way you go, a Nebula membership is a great way to demonstrate your support for a one-of-a-kind creator-owned platform, and to fund the continued production of amazing originals, and there's great new stuff hitting the platform all the time. So for all of you who are already Nebula members, a massive thanks from me, although I feel compelled to say you should probably be watching this video on Nebula, where it appears ad-free and without this promo section in it. Just a thought. And that's all I've got. Thanks for joining today, and thanks as always to the patrons whose direct support keeps life kind of stable and predictable, even in weeks where the rest of the world is just total chaos. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I'll be back to talk all about Atlanta next week, and I'll see you then.